Hey, it's Greg Sestero from The Room, and you are listening to Cinema Psycho Show.
Oh, goody, goody, here it comes.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show.
You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
Oh, my God, don't stop now!
With your hosts, Brian, John, and Elaine.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I am not Brian Connaughton, but your other co-host, John Wollescroft, joined solo this time by Elaine Wollescroft.
Hello.
Oh, and here lies the body of Mary Lee, died at the age of 103. For 15 years, she kept her virginity. Not a bad record for this vicinity.
Cool. So opened hot with like the worst joke ever.
Hey, it's from Jaws, which happy 4th of July, everybody. We will be talking about Jaws this episode, just kind of jumping right into things. Unfortunately, Brian Talkish, excuse me, that's a friend of mine, Brian Coddington. You know, we've only done 142 episodes now. Brian Coddington will not be with us. He is in China competing in roulette chess.
He's an expert. You guys probably didn't know that. It's cool. We're here to let you know. But he's traveling the world with his, Well,
roulette chess, that's, when every time you get a piece taken, you have to, pull the gun at your head. It's a difficult game. If you're really good at chess, you're going to watch a lot of people die.
Okay.
Or he just couldn't be with us for personal reasons, and here we are.
Too. Yeah. Yep. So this is episode 142.
Yep. And it was June 20th, 1975. Jaws came out, so it is the 44th anniversary of it, which is kind of a lame anniversary, but that's not really why we're here.
45th isn't necessarily that much more awesome. Like 50th is
it has a 5.
Cool,
it has a 5.
Right. I'm okay with it. I think it's fine.
But the reason we're doing this is because it's the 4th of July weekend here, and I don't know about anybody else because it's kind of a weird holiday for movies. Like, do you guys watch like movies religiously during this holiday, or is it more just about like barbecue and setting your fingers off, like blowing your fingers off and drinking beer? Like, because obviously Christmas has, It's a Wonderful Life, Christmas Story, and all that kind of good stuff, and Halloween has Enter Horror Movie here, whichever one it be, and even Easter has the 10 Commandments, for better or worse, on ABC.
My favorite scary movie.
Hey! Put it in the steel jar there. Yeah.
I did.
You can't just steal things, Elaine.
I like stealing things. I was literally just about to call myself out. You need to give me a chance.
Was that sex pervert Joss Whedon? Is that one of his?
No, it was Kevin Williamson. It's a line from
the poor man sex pervert Joss Whedon.
But I'm not sure that Kevin Williamson's a sex pervert, and cheating on his wife doesn't make Joss Whedon a sex pervert. It just makes him a massive disappointment.
Okay.
But yes, no, I stole that from Dawson's Creek. It's a funny line.
Okay.
Jen Lindley forever.
But now Lane and I, we watch Independence Day and Jaws like every 4th of July season. I just don't know if everybody else watches.
And Team America.
And Team America, and sometimes Uncle Sam.
Well, I think it's funny, John, because you and I are filmmakers. I think it stands to reason that we would probably find more tradition in the moving picture than many people might,
The moving pictures, the picture shows.
Yeah, I think that's something that we might be unique to us just because it's how we're wired. We're media people.
Well, let us know, Psychos Nation. Do you make an effort to watch Jaws or Independence Day every 4th of July holiday weekend, or do you just catch it because it's on TV 24 hours a day, both movies? But obviously, it takes place during the 4th of July, so it's an honorary 4th of July movie. So we thought we would hit that up as not only the best 4th of July movie, but one of the, in our opinions, the best movies of all time. And we're doing a podcast, so you can't see, but I'm wearing my Alex Kittner Memorial
it's
Shark Hunt
hilarious
t-shirt.
That you are.
I'm sitting in front of our Jaws poster that was signed by Richard Dreyfuss.
You would never guess that it's signed by Richard Dreyfuss, though he signed it so huge.
He was too busy talking.
It looks fake as hell, which I think is so funny because it says John, hi. And then it says R. Dreyfuss at the bottom. He didn't know what to write.
I wish he didn't have time to write Richard. You should have put Dick Dreyfuss.
Yeah. Well, you'd think he'd have it down, but I don't think he was that used to doing signing events. Really,
no.
I think he might have been new to it. So don't go in the water. It's an easy one, right?
Right. Yeah. So you couldn't think of what to write. So
But
we were.
I don't know. I think that must be weird when you're put on the spot, because didn't Linda Blair say like "sweet dreams" in hers? Like
That's what she writes on everybody's.
it doesn't make any sense.
Her handler comes over to you and it's like, she's going to write "sweet dreams." Is that okay with you? And kind of like looking at you like,
If it's not okay, don't fucking say anything.
Unless you got an extra 50 in your pocket and you want her to write hi.
Wow.
L Blair.
This is weird, man. But yeah, I mean the poster's cool.
Yeah, but we got our Jaws Funko Pops. We have our Bruce here, and of course, I picked this up for us. We got our apricot brandy.
Oh, excellent.
And, let me pour some of this. That actually picks up amazingly.
Oh, there's so much of it. Okay, that's better.
All right, now here, Elaine, we got to kick this off
Thank
Quint
you.
style. All right, ready?
All right.
Bon
Cheers.
voyage, lady.
Happy 4th of July.
That'll put some hair on you.
Oh my God, my chest is burning.
And he
Hello.
demanded a case of that stuff, but
Woof. Gross.
But yeah, so obviously this movie needs very little to no introduction. It's one of the most famous movies of all time, one of the first blockbusters. But I would like to come out of the gate hot on this episode.
Cool.
It is a great movie. I love it. We did an episode on some of our favorite movies of all time. It's in my top 10. But can we stop pretending that this is a great film?
Ooh, hot take. Okay.
This is, well, I mean, other than this being a Roger Corman movie with money, this is not, Citizen Kane.
Well, it's funny, John, because I think that a lot of what Jaws stands for is greater than the sum of its parts. Because, you say this is one of the first blockbusters. This is the first blockbuster, I think. If you look back in time, this is the very first. And I think the things that they did, for anyone who is not super familiar with the making of Jaws, so they called the animatronic shark that they used, they called him Bruce. So just more brandy? Is that am I driving you to drink, sir?
Yeah, this is not as very professional.
All right, well, enjoy. Bottoms up, sir.
All right, ready? There's somebody that's into that. Oh, God.
Okay.
That burns a lot.
Breathe through it. I'm talking.
All right, yeah.
So, but when so anyone who's not familiar, the shark that they had used, there was 4 of them in total, I believe, and the sharks were referred to as Bruce.
After Spielberg's lawyer.
And the film was extremely, at the time, difficult to make. Spielberg was 27, which makes me want to kill myself, and and they went and with the filming, it seemed like the shark hardly ever worked, especially in the water. So I think that story of special effects and how that can make or break a movie, we talk about this all the time. We've said so many times that Empire Strikes Back would not have worked if Yoda had sucked, if you didn't buy it, And I think that considering for 1975 that they were able to create this and make it work and that it still holds up, I think that's why this movie is so lauded as being possibly better than it actually is. It stands for greater things.
Well, it's a great action movie. It's a great horror movie. It's a great popcorn movie. I'm saying that when you look at just using the Oscars as a barometer, which we all know of the Psychos show, very complicated views on that. But this is the same year that Nashville came out, with Robert Altman kind of changing the game with movies. And One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think, being one of the most defining movies of the 1970s.
Right.
I don't know if Jaws belongs in that pedigree. I think it to me, I put it with Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is not one of the finest films ever made. It's one of the most entertaining movies of all time.
Right.
But I think that people laud Jaws as one of the finest pieces of cinematic achievement of all time. And if you want to talk about a successful movie, an entertaining movie, then yes, but not as one of the, the greatest films ever made. I would also lump Star Wars in with that, where I think people unduly put so much, pomp and circumstance on Star Wars when it's just one of the most entertaining movies of all time. Let's not call this like a great artistic achievement.
Right. Well, I mean, it does have its moments, because this was the first...
Have I lost the entire audience, do you think, already?
Probably. I mean, we're doing this episode and you just shit on it saying it's not that great. So we'll see where we go from here.
I just told you we're riddled with Jaws merchandise around me, all right? So we love the movie. We're going to
the thing you need to know about John Psycho's Nation is that he's a flaming hypocrite. Hates Disney, but loves the parks. Doesn't think this is a very good movie, but I'm literally looking at the words Jaws over his head.
I didn't say it wasn't a good movie. I said it's not
a great movie. Well, that's
one of the great in the annals of time.
Right. Well, like I said, I think it stands for something greater than it is, and you did have cinematographer Bill Butler on the project, and I think that also was very definitive because he gave us the dolly zoom. This is the first time that it was created, right?
No, I hate to be that actually hipster. But Hitchcock did it first.
Okay.
I think in Vertigo.
Okay.
When the first time it was done. It is credited to this movie, and every film school teacher will show you what they will call the Jaws shot. And so that's and then Goodfellas famously did it as well. So it's been followed, but Jaws gets all the credit for it. But I think it was Vertigo that did it first, and there was I think it was done in television where a guy was like running down a hall, kind of like an Outer Limits, Twilight Zone kind of show, and he can't get out, and the camera's like, or the camera's dollying backwards but zooming in on him, and that's how you create the effect, kind of like, oh, this hallway never ends, I can't get out, so it had been done before.
Okay, but
I'm sure Spielberg would happily take all the credit in the world for it.
I'm sure he would, but the also the cinematography in general, I do think is very skillful. I think the composition, especially, I think that this opening sequence of this film might be one of the most gripping opening sequences. And it's interesting because this is...
After you get past the piss poor acting.
We're going swimming! Okay, well, if you... I was talking about just the cinematography. Yeah. But if you kind of take a look at that as far as... The film is concerned. Now, this is based on a book that came out in 1974. This is Peter Benchley's book. Yeah. But the book and the movie open the same way. And I think bringing that scene to life, it was done with a lot of skill as far as the cinematography goes.
Yeah, the poor actress, was violently whipped around by the machine they had, under the water. And going back and forth, people think that's for the movie. The machine was malfunctioning. It was whipping her back and forth. It wasn't supposed to do that.
Wow.
I think it was just supposed to take her a couple of feet and she was supposed to go underwater. And the machine just malfunctioned and messed her up real bad. Oh. But Richard Zanuck, the producer of the film, just threw her an extra $100 and said, get out of here, toots.
It was the 70s. Yeah. I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
But so let's go back. Let's lead up to this because I think the making of this film and the promoting of this film is almost as interesting as the film itself.
I agree.
So now you went above and beyond, Elaine, and read the book. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the publication, a little bit about the book here?
Absolutely. So this actually came out in the middle of winter in 1974, which I think is amazing that the movie was released the following summer. I think that's amazing how fast it was shot and got out there.
Well, they say a lot of the sales of the book is actually in part thanks to Richard Zanuck, the producer of the film, and the other producing partners, and other people involved with the studio buying up thousands and thousands of copies of this book because they wanted to immediately see it in order to decide if they wanted to buy the rights to it.
That is interesting because it sold over 5 million copies its first year, so that would attribute to a lot of its sales.
I think a lot of people said, hey, this must be a book to take a look at.
Cool, that's really neat. Yeah. The film was made for $7 million, so I think this is also a good example of doing a lot with a little. But as far as the book goes, it is both it has more depth but is a little bit more muddled than the film, I will say. There are a couple of major differences. So get out now if you want to read the book. Spoiler alert, I am going to ruin the book. Not extravagantly, but if you haven't read it, and you would like to, please stop now.
From some of the reviews that I read online, apparently you're not going to be missing anything. Apparently this book is hot garbage.
I liked it. It's something, again, that when it's hot out, it's nice to read at the beach. It's nice to read, by the pool, that sort of thing. So I would say the biggest the biggest theme from this book that I took away from it is how based on the recession it is. It's almost like a parallel for economic recession. And they touch a little bit on it in the movie, but it's, the town is much more on the edge of financial despair in this case.
And it's Long Island, New York, right? It's not Boston.
No, it is Amity, New York.
I think it's supposed to be near Long Island.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the geography there is in the movie, Brody's just moved to this place, and in the book, his wife actually like summered at Amity, and there's a big class issue. Like there's a lot of class, mentions of that, where we're the summer people, we're the salt, you guys come in, you're intruders, you come in for the summer and then you leave. Like, we're island people, we belong here, we've been here all our lives. Like, basically people from NYC. It's kind of like the Hamptons in a way, where people just fly, come in for the summer and then they leave back to like their penthouses or whatever.
But they're all dependent on them for their financial securities.
Exactly. And what happens is the town's kind of on the edge of financial ruin, and that's why the situation with the shark is so dire. And I think they do that, pretty well in the film, where they explain that, but they kind of say like, well, if we have a bad summer, then we're all going to be in trouble. But in the novel, it's more like, if we don't make any money this summer, we are screwed.
Do you know what this bizarrely reminds me of? And you think I'm a little crazy first. It reminds me of The Dark Knight. Because it seems like there is warring factions or issues between like Batman and the mob. And here comes the shark in the Joker, who just completely muddles and screws everything up for everybody, who's a problem that nobody foresaw.
Kind of. I mean, it's easy to see the shark as kind of a symbol of recession itself, because it doesn't have, it doesn't care who you are. A shark's going to come after you no matter what. I mean, something can be said for the same as the recession. But what's interesting is, so in the novel, Brody's wife, Ellen, she, was one of those people that only came for the summers. She was one of those country club, people or whatever. And she's moved here with Brody, Martin Brody, the main guy in the movie. But she's moved here with him, and that causes its own friction because in a way, like there's socioeconomic like pressure there. So that's a big part of the story.
What are the key differences? Like, let's just kind of bottle that. That's a big one.
Yeah. But they talk about class, they talk about politics, and actually the fact that Ellen's in it more than she is in the movie. So Ellen's in a lot of this,
and Hooper's in Ellen a lot more too in the book.
That's true. That's actually, I would say, probably the biggest difference. Especially the fact that Ellen was part of like the upper class. Like, so was Hooper. He was they knew each other when they were young, and so they start up this affair again. And Ellen does a lot of downers in the book. She just does like her like happy pills and just kind of sits down for it.
So basically, one of the key things that I've kind of gotten from understanding of the book is that everyone's kind of a miserable, awful person, and the only person worth rooting for is a shark. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, kind of. I would say that like Brody's still a pretty good man in the book. I hate that that Ellen cheats on him with Hooper, but they kind of knew each other when they were young. I think they dated briefly when they were young too, so they just kind of like rekindled the old flame. And,
it's the 70s,
and that was the biggest difference. But there's like an exhausting amount of pages dedicated to the two of them in the book, which I think was a smart move to take it out because I think it bogs the story down. And then the other one. I was reading an article today of the differences just to kind of see what the most exciting talking points would be, and I really liked this one. I remembered this from obviously from reading the book, but in the movie the mayor is an asshole, and in the book the mayor is an asshole who's in deep with the mob. I thought that was funny.
But yeah, so when they went to make it into a film, Spielberg, when he got on board, like, he was one of the people that said, I'm the only person I root for in this book is the shark. Mm-hmm. So he said one of the big things that I want to have changed is that we want more likable characters and, more people you can relate to. So they made a lot of changes when they brought this to film.
Yeah, well, the first of them, I think, was something that's also an interesting filmmaking point. Benchley, the book's author, producers had promised him the rights to make the screenplay, which is something, that I would think before that would have been kind of unprecedented. People, when their book was optioned for movie rights, I don't think that was their first thought, but you see it now all the time with J.K. Rowling and with
Michael Crichton in Jurassic Park.
Right. So like they always want the screenplay rights. And if I ever wrote a novel that was optioned for screenplay, I would do the same. But the problem was, since Spielberg wanted to focus so much on the shark, Peter Benchley really, really struggled hard with the screenplay. I think he did something like 3 or 4 drafts that he turned in, and they still had to undergo like major revisions. So if you see, there's like a couple of people that are credited with the screenplay because he struggled.
I think that was a mistake, considering they wanted to change it so drastically from the source material. They said that the film almost has like 27 scenes in it that weren't in any way in the book, because they just rewrote this so much and changed so many of the characters and changed so much of the timeline and the history of Amity, that why would you have the guy whose novel you're butchering write the screenplay? It doesn't make much sense to me.
Right.
But it's funny, this was just a runaway successful novel. Even Peter Benchley himself said, it's never going to be successful. Nobody buys the first novel from a writer, especially not one about a fish. That's nearly a quote from him directly.
That's pretty cool.
But it ended up selling like 5 million copies, became a huge success, and so obviously the movie was to follow. And the weird thing is, the book success kept getting bigger as they were filming the movies. They must have been, at first, pretty excited to be making this movie, because it's like, wow, that book just keeps selling, everybody's going to want to see the movie. But this is notoriously one of the most disastrous film shoots in the history of the earth.
I mean, it's amazing the movie got made. There's actually a very good behind the scenes documentary, The Making of Jaws, that I think is really worth it for anybody who loves
zippy
this sort
title
of thing.
there.
I know. They were very succinct. They're very clever about it. So, this could have been a huge disaster for Spielberg, because he spent way more money than he was supposed to, and because of all the problems with Bruce and the practical effects that they were doing, he was running out of time for the shoot.
Well, he wasn't their first choice. He was, like you said, he was 27 years old. The only other big film that he had done was Sugarland Express. Duel was a TV movie. Sugarland Express is the only film he had under his belt. It kind of reminds me of Tim Burton with Batman. A very young, up-and-coming director, but with a big project. They actually, I think, had got the director of Death Wish. They wanted to bring him on, but he pitched the opening scene as it comes up from the water and you see the whole town, but then it turns around and it's a whale. And then the producers immediately let him go and said, if you can't tell the difference between a shark and a fucking whale, then get out of our office.
That's incredible.
I don't think he literally meant that he was replacing Jaws with a whale, but it's like, I want to turn you.
Gotcha.
But they eventually landed on a young Stevie Spielberg's, and they wanted that raw feeling of shooting on actual water, not in a sound stage with a controlled water tank like you see with Titanic and things like that.
Again, with its complications.
This is supposed to be a 5-week shoot, and it went 7 months, 5 weeks, early May to mid-June, and it ended up wrapping around Christmas. I think it was just an utter disaster. It ballooned so much, how much the movie cost. Spielberg thought every day he was going to be fired, because like you said, you got one movie under your belt, which is kind of like that would mean that was that little short period of time where Spielberg was trying to copy the real directors like Martin Scorsese and Coppola, and other directors, where it's like, I'm going to make one of these indie art films, and it's like, no kid, it's not your wheelhouse. No, go make the shark movie. Go make the Roger Corman movie.
Yeah.
But somehow he didn't get fired on it. And obviously, it was an interesting shoot. But we kind of, I think we should get to the casting of it real quick.
Sure.
If we're not careful, this episode is going to go 3 hours. But
we watch it every year, so you and I feel like have a lot of unique information because we see it so much.
But everybody and their mama was considered for the role of Brody. Our main hero.
Interesting.
Including Gene Hackman. And
really? I didn't know that.
Many options, before they ended up on Roy Scheider, including Charlton Heston, who held a bitter grudge against Steven Spielberg to the day he died.
Oh my God, really? Would he have played? Would he have played Brody?
Yeah.
It's so hard to think of Charlton Heston as like a younger man.
Yeah, because back then, like Chuck Heston was a huge star. Like we forget that, you know,
Sure.
'Cause we think of him as the clown from the National Rifle Association. But you know, Steven Spielberg did not want Charlton Heston because he said as soon as they see Chuck Heston, they're going to know the shark loses. You know,
That's
because
funny.
he's this big time, you know, movie star. And then when Charlton Heston realized he could have been in Jaws, they were being considered. Steven Spielberg turned him down. He just bitterly hated Spielberg forever.
You know, sometimes you just got to hold a grudge, I guess.
Well, Spielberg wanted him for 1941. He's like, shove it up your ass, kid. You know?
Oh. Yikes.
Yeah. But yeah, so many were considered. They ended up on Roy Scheider. And then actually Richard Dreyfuss turned down his part.
Oh, several times.
Yeah.
But Spielberg wanted him. He was Spielberg's first choice.
Well, because he said, that sounds like a movie I want to watch, not the one I want to be in.
Yeah.
But when he, I think, like his movie that he made in 1974 kind of like flopped, he like called his agent and said, can I get this back?
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So Lorraine...
sorry.
I was just going to say Lorraine Gary played the part of Ellen Brody's wife. And I thought it was interesting because she and Schneider have really good chemistry. And that's something that's like...
She's a very good actress. She was one of the only ones that Spielberg said, like, it's her or nobody. And also the actor whose name escapes me at the moment who plays the mayor. He said,
oh, yeah.
I want him and nobody else.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, because Lorraine Gary, I think that she was the wife of one of the studio heads. So sometimes you wonder, like, oh, really? But she was so good in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, obviously, we had a human whiskey bottle. Notice Robert Shaw.
And he's British, right?
Chief. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. This is cool. This is something that's totally different. So his like monologue where he explains like sharks tearing everybody apart, like in the very end of the movie, that's completely unique to the movie.
Yeah.
That's actually something that's like not
Do
even.
you know why
covered.
they even shot that? That wasn't even in the script.
It was his idea, right?
Yeah,
Robert
because
Shaw's idea.
because they had hours upon hours of downtime because the shark wouldn't work. And so
interesting.
he's like, why don't I just improvise this speech, you know? And then like they kind of wrote it, and then the actor added his 2 cents, and then he just decided to shoot it, like, because it's like the script called for like, you know, the characters to be drinking at night, and I think it was just kind of supposed to be like them showing their scars, and then the shark attacks, and then they just filmed that because they had more time to kill, and
Right.
it ends up being one of the most famous scenes in the movie.
It's crazy. And too, Robert Shaw, you and I have talked about this several times. So Robert Shaw tried to do it when he was actually drunk because he was a drinker, but then he tried to do it sober.
Yeah.
And they cut together sober him and like acting, and then actual drunk him doing the monologue, and you can't tell that it's two different states of his being. You and I have tried to be, and a couple of times we're like, "Oh no, he's gone." Like,
Yeah, he's glazed
inside
over
you
that
can
one,
see
yeah.
like his soul isn't in his eyes anymore because he's drunk. But
He's not a man who drinks too much. He's a drunk who doesn't sober enough.
yeah, man. I mean, bless him. But he was so convincing.
He was
as-
very good in the movie.
Yeah,
He didn't
as
let his
Quint.
drinking like hurt him. But he was one of many people who they consider for Quint, and also everybody. It's very laughable. Everybody they consider for Quint had a tax issue. They wanted Lee Marvin. He couldn't do it because he was evading the tax, the IRS. They wanted somebody else who was evading the IRS, and they ended up on Robert, who was evading the IRS. And on days he wasn't shooting, he could only shoot in America for so long before the IRS would come after him. So on days he wasn't shooting, he wasn't on schedule, they had to fly him to Canada.
What?
And as soon as they finished filming, on his last scene, he had to jump the country. Because if he was in the country for a certain length of time, they could come at him for tax fraud.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because I guess he bought more Jack Daniels than he did pay his taxes.
He should have gone to the duty free, man. No taxes there.
Yeah, but
That's
they
crazy.
they ran into a lot of trouble with the actors. Richard Dreyfuss and Robert Shaw notoriously hated each other on set.
Which is funny because like he and like Quentin and Hooper like are always at odds with each other.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
But the thing is, he was supposedly like a great gentleman when he wasn't drinking. But as soon as he was drinking, he just turned into a nightmare, and he would just absolutely just bully Richard Dreyfuss because this is like one of his second or third like major Hollywood film, so would always give him shit. And I remember one day on set while they were waiting to shoot, like he's on his like 8th or 9th I'm gonna guess apricot brandy, and he goes, boy, I wish I could quit drinking. And Richard Dreyfuss just came up to him, grabbed his drink out of his hand, and threw it in the ocean. said, "There, you just quit."
Wow.
Yeah, they did not get along very well.
I bet. Well, one thing that I just wanted to go back to really quick is that monologue that they do in the Orca where Quint tells that story about the USS Indianapolis. That's a true story, isn't it?
Yeah. The plane did go down after it dropped off the atom bomb.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
That just
and
like,
a lot of
people-
men were eaten alive.
That's by sharks, which is just bone chilling. Like that is horrifying to me.
But yeah, so they got their cinematographers you mentioned in place. They got the actors. They got everything going. They got the script how they want it. And then they made the cardinal mistake that you should never do. They filmed on open water, which is the worst thing that you can do.
Well, they tried to, right?
Right.
And so for some of the scenes, though, they had to reshoot in a more controlled environment, didn't they?
Right. Yeah. And they did some tricks where after they realized how unsuccessful they were being, that they would shoot on land. And like right at the beginning of the water, and they would put the camera on a tripod that had a buoy on it, and they would use long focal lenses. And the boat wasn't moving, but the camera was. It was buoying up and down to create the idea that the boat was moving.
That's amazing. I love that.
And it was
love
just
stuff like that.
another way to get around it. But yeah, it was. They would have rain come in and the waves would get too high, and all of a sudden the actors would be drowning and the sound equipment would be drowning. There was somebody said some of the actors were tipped over on a boat. They said, "Save the actors," and the audio guy said, "Fuck the actors, save the sound men," because they were going to be electrocuted.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
Yeah, they would constantly lose film reels because of water. It was a completely disastrous thing. Spielberg said, "My next movie, not only is it going to be completely on land, I'm not even going to have a bathroom scene."
That's funny. Well, he hasn't done another shark movie since, like nothing about sharks or anything, which I think is interesting.
Right. But yeah, so it ended up being a disastrous shoot where they had more downtime in between takes than they actually were shooting anything. That's why it took 7 months instead of 5 weeks. And the main problem was, and this is one of the first movies to really use walkie-talkies, is them walkie-talking back and forth. The shark's not working. The shark's not working. The shark never worked.
Well, like what a happy accident though. And like, I usually don't use that phrase, but because of that, Spielberg had to figure out a way to get around the shark not working. And I feel like he added much more suspense, much more drama, and made a better film because
you don't see the shark that
wasn't
much.
available. Yeah, it's like the hint of it. And I read somewhere that the shark shows up the same number of times in the book and the movie. He's in it 5 times.
Screen time, the shark has 4 minutes.
So he shows up 5 times for 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
That's bananas.
Yeah.
And it's about a shark, and like no one would ever doubt that. I feel like if you asked somebody like how long is he in the movie, how long do you see the shark, I feel like you would say like 25 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, in the second half of the movie, you see him every 3 seconds or something. Yeah. And you're right, that builds attention. It was as you said, a happy little accident that they had to film around it where the camera was the shark's point of view, or you saw the barrels that it was dragging, but you didn't see the shark. Like, and that just built up the tension. Like, so much. And that was to their benefit, because I think they wanted the shark in every damn scene. I'm sure the producers wanted the shark, everywhere.
Well, and it made such a much better film without him being in it. And we can't discount the soundtrack in this movie. I mean, John Williams is some of his best work is in this.
I got a lot to say about that, but just to finish up with old Brucey there. But with the shark, I don't think it's as fake looking as people say, and maybe that's because they were so judicious with what they shot.
I agree.
And some of the editor said that like every single shot you saw the shark was just about every single shot they had, because it broke down so much.
Right.
And here was the ingenious thing of of how they designed this shark.
Okay.
They designed it and they didn't ever test it in water, and so they bring it to Boston. And they put it in the water, and the fucking thing sinks to the bottom of the water.
Oh my God, why wouldn't you test it in the water?
And they went, oh, fuck. And so they have a dive team go and rescue it. And so they have to fix some stuff. And they go back and they fix it. And they're like, okay, it floats now. And they put it in the water, and the thing starts immediately malfunctioning and making all these weird faces and shaking back and forth.
Oh my
God.
God.
Well, why is it doing that? I'm like, oh, I don't know. It didn't do that in the tank at Universal Studios. Like, what do you mean? The tank? You mean the non-saltwater tank? Oh, damn it.
You're killing me, man.
Yeah.
Well, what's really interesting, I think, now with Bruce and everything with the the mechanics of the sharks. So aren't films magical, kids? So a number of Bruces were made, and my understanding is that one was made just for the ride at Universal Studios.
Yeah.
And that's actually, they just restored it this year. So we don't talk about TV on this show, but John and I are both Walking Dead fans. And Greg Nicotero from Walking Dead, he does a lot of their special, like they're more like gruesome special effects. There's a whole team, but Nicotero is usually famous if someone's like spleen is being pulled through their eyeball, like that's probably Nicotero's work. But they've taken on restoring Bruce for the future Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, which is going to be in California. But John, I think you and I definitely need to go.
Hell yeah!
It sounds amazing. But yeah. So Greg Nicotero's team is working on doing that. Most of them. Because they were so shitty, John, most of the Bruces like just degraded because they got wet, they were messed up,
They had one that was like a left profile Bruce, and that was like they had puppeteers on the other side, like where the camera couldn't see. They had one on the right, and then they had the full body Bruce, and like you said, the one that was made for the amusement park. So,
yeah, and it's 25 feet long, made from the same mold that created the on-screen sharks, but it was on display at Universal for like almost 20 years. But then somehow when they went to scrap the Jaws ride, I guess Bruce ended up in like a nearby junkyard and the team was able to recover it.
How do you make that mistake? And how does somebody like not find out where they put it?
They got it from somebody. I think someone like, I don't think he took it home, but I think the guy like that grabbed it, like he owned the junkyard, I think.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
That I'm not super clear on.
It's amazing how that would be an unspeakable treasure for so many of us, and to them it's like, well, we're not using the ride anymore, junkyard it.
Well, what's interesting too is like we're just hearing about this now, but I believe they've been working on it since 2016, because that's when it was gifted by someone named Nathan Adlin, and his father had acquired it after the studio scrapped it and just kept it at his own junkyard. So. The Junkyard Bruce, I guess. But the museum I mentioned, that opens in 2020, and I don't know, dude, it looks amazing.
Yeah, we'll probably have to make it out there.
All about it.
But mercifully, the film does get finished, and it comes down to the last shot in the movie is actually the last thing they filmed, because they had to blow up the shark.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. And they didn't have the right film stock for the day, and so Steven Spielberg said, well, you get the right film stock tomorrow and shoot it. I'm out. No, what do you mean? He's like, I have a plane. I'm out of here. Goodbye. Like, he was so close to having a breakdown that he just left.
Wow.
And he was on a plane with Richard Dreyfuss. And, Dreyfuss was like, well, like, how did that go with the explosion scene? He's like, I don't know. They're filming it now. He's like, what do you mean they're filming it now and you're not there? And he's like, no, I had to leave. And it ended up being a tradition from Steven Spielberg for every one of his films. He's not there on the last shot of the day of the film.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yes.
I guess it worked out. I mean, you got to think about, being at the helm of such an expensive project. Like, I've read all the accounts that, if you've seen like old George, like not old, but young George Lucas, like from a long time ago, like dude is like skinny as hell. He's reedy. He's like real like thin. Dude had a heart attack.
He caught up
during. Yeah. Well, I knew you'd say something unkind, about him, but he had a heart attack when he was doing A New Hope. Because of the stress. So, I mean, like, I think it's interesting that these guys just are, in these high stakes situations, like...
He's like, oh, I want to go back to making movies about cars my dad bought me. Aww.
I mean, I kind of don't blame him. But yeah, so that's how they ended up destroying Bruce. And then he actually just dies of exhaustion in the novel, which isn't very cinematic.
Yeah, because they were, like, stabbed him a bunch, right?
Yeah, he's just, like, tired. I don't know. It's, like, kind of anticlimactic, honestly.
And I think Peter Benchley was pissed about that, but it's like, Pete... This is the movies.
Well,
you need a big visual.
Well, what I think that Peter was like mostly pissed about was just this kind of demonized sharks for society for a while.
Which they
upset,
are,
know?
And they are a fairly tame creature. That's the thing is they're not predatory. They don't really go after people,
right? Right.
Unless there is like they are starving and you are deep in the water and you are visibly injured and you smell like food. They're not gonna prey after you.
Yeah,
it's.
Peter Benchley did a ton of conservation work for sharks after the fact, though, and he actually wrote a book in early 2000s. That's one of like the definitive shark, like resources, I guess. I don't know. Words are hard and stupid, and I don't care for them.
He needed more money, is what you're saying.
Peter Benchley?
Yeah.
No, I mean, if you look, like, he's done a lot of work to kind of, I don't know, clean up the good name of sharks or so. I don't know. Like, he was worried that they were so upsetting, you know? He was worried that people, like, were so, like, afraid of them and upset, you know?
Yeah.
So.
They finished the film, and I think, just like we always say with Star Wars was saved in the edit, I think that this film was absolutely saved in the edit.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it was done by, and of course the name's slipping me right now, but the editor was a very famous editor, won Best Editing, and Spielberg cattily, I think, held it against this person for the rest of his life because he was upset that so many people said, oh, she saved this 27-year-old hackneyed kid and made a great movie out of the scraps that were given to him. And he's like, I'll show you. I'll never work with this person again.
That's so rude. Yeah, Verna Fields.
Yeah, Verna Fields. Yeah.
That was her.
And, yeah, she won Best Editor for this, and he wasn't nominated for Best Director because they wanted to give a gimme to Fellini.
Oh, okay.
And I think that he was so bitter about not getting nominated for Best Director, but it won Best Editing, that he wanted to prove that, like, oh, this wasn't saved in the edit. I'm Steven Spielberg. I'm great. You know,
that's shitty. I mean, come on, this is a collaborative art form.
Yeah.
Do you know what's interesting too? When film and cinema first started, like, really picking up, like, back in the day, a lot of editors were women because it was kind of thought of as, like, women's work. You know, it was like piecing something together like a quilt. Mm-hmm. But then once it gained more traction as being, you know, media being like a male dominated field, they of course took it away from women.
Of course. Well, after we realized there's so much we can do with editing as technology increases, we realize, you stupid broads, that's only a man could do that.
You can't sit at a computer with your vagina. That's crazy.
You girls can still cook better than us, though. Hey, there you go.
Hey, go make me a steak. Wow. Fuck all of that. Okay. That was gross. But Verna Fields, a very celebrated editor, and the same thing with Marcia Lucas, who saved A New Hope.
Tell that to George. Yeah, so the studio saw the cut of the movie and immediately said, we're going to give you the biggest promotional budget we've ever given a movie ever. And that was $700,000.
Man, and they spend millions on that shit now.
Yeah, basically whatever, if you know what the budget of a movie was, do about a little less than half, and that's how much
they spend on marketing.
Yeah, so if, like, you know, I don't know what the exact number for Endgame, but if it was like $200 million, they spent probably $95 million on marketing.
Hey, you know, you can't put Iron Man on all of those cans of Dr. Pepper for free, kids.
But yeah, this was a marketing blitz. You know, I mean, they had an amazing trailer with that voiceover guy, Percy.
Oh yeah, we
rest
looked
in
him
peace.
Up. He passed away.
We're gonna see if he wanted to be a part of the show, but he is dead.
I'm sure he would have loved it.
Yeah. The trailer was amazing. They had Jaws swag. You know, it was everywhere that you looked. Like, people think about Star Wars and how that blew up with, like, merchandise. Or when we talked a couple weeks ago on the Batman episode about, you know, Batmania. This was, Elaine, as you had mentioned, you know, probably about 30 minutes ago, the first true summer blockbuster, if you don't count Gone with the Wind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I don't think anybody does, because this is more of the genre of the blockbuster.
Right.
And this marketing blitz is 2 years before Star Wars even came out. So I mean, this is like setting the precedent. We can kind of blame Spielberg for the summer blockbuster, good or bad. Now they're releasing summer blockbusters in April because, you know, fuck you. Yeah. But this actually came out in June, which was nice.
Yeah. But, you know, and they did a lot of really cheap things with how they sent the movies to the movie houses. Like, if they were in, like, San Bernardino, they would only send half of the movie of the reels they were supposed to there. And the thing is, then what that did is that created huge lines in San Bernardino, but it also cost half the people that couldn't go to those movies to Los Angeles to see the movie, and then there were huge lines in Los Angeles. And they said the best marketing tool you can have is driving by a movie theater, seeing Jaws in the marquee, and lines down the street. So they forced lines just to, like, inflate interest in the movie.
That is diabolical.
Yeah, and this movie was huge right out the gate. It made, I believe it was $200 million. Mm-hmm. And adjusted for inflation, that is $1.06 billion, which makes it the seventh highest grossing film of all time.
I think once it's all said and done, now this is probably, all time. I'm seeing the figure of 470 million worldwide.
Worldwide, yeah, 200 million domestically,
Okay, so
and
you're
not
talking
counting
domestics.
re-releases too.
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, and it was like because they said like we don't want to just own the weekend, we want to own the summer, and that movie. Yeah,
Did exactly
usually
that.
movies they play for like a month and a half if they're good. They
Sure.
could play for 2 weeks if they suck.
Or
and
a
they're out.
week, I mean.
Or a week, yeah. I'm looking at you, Yule Bowl. But yeah, this movie I think played for like 3 or 4 months. And people just kept coming back and coming
Wow.
back because movie tickets weren't that outrageous by then. Like, I don't want to sound like an old man because I wasn't even alive yet, but back in my day, you could buy a movie ticket for 25 cents. So people went and they saw Jaws in the theater like 5, 6, 7, 8 times.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let's go see Jaws again. It's not that much money, and it's great.
And I can't imagine like in the big screen situation with that soundtrack, like on the the surrounding speakers and everything. I mean, like that's one that would be so great in the theater environment. It's so immersive.
And I came in hot, like I said at the beginning of the episode, by I don't think that this film should be praised as like one of the greatest art films of all time, but I will say it's probably the best popcorn movie ever. Is that? And I'm not taking anything away from it there.
Better than Jurassic Park?
I would say maybe. Now better than Star Wars as a popcorn movie, I don't know. It's up for debate. For that type of movie.
Fair.
Those movies.
Those kinds of movies.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, you got people lined up down the street. It's a huge hit, and not everybody thought it was going to be. A lot of people in interviews were trying to salvage their careers, like Richard Dreyfuss, who was like, oh, well, if it's a disaster, it wasn't my fault. The shark didn't work, and it was raining all the time, and then it was really successful, and he was like, I knew it all along.
I mean, but like that's got to be so scary as an actor.
Right, because he thought he was going to get blackballed because he was in that god-awful shark movie that was horrible.
And I could see it going like super wrong. It could have been a disaster, but it's one of those films, and I think it's funny, John. Usually we break down the plot of a movie, but I think that all of the things surrounding it are much more interesting, especially the making of. Like, there isn't, to me, I don't know that there's a film that's actually a success and is actually good, because obviously, like, The Room is notorious for this, but I don't know that there's another successful mainstream film that has as notorious a making of story as Jaws, just because there were so many problems.
I would think Apocalypse Now, maybe.
Okay.
And I'm only mentioning these in case the audience wants to like find some of these. Like Apocalypse Now is Terry Gilliam's Don Quixote was so horrible it was just never made.
Oh wow, that's special.
Never finished. I should say it was never finished.
That's special.
But so yeah, there's a couple of options. But you're right. This one was just a nightmare, and I'm surprised that everybody got out of it without killing each other.
Yeah, one and two, just like they got out of it with a success. I mean, that's fantastic.
But when we talked about the Batman episode, we had mentioned how people were like, "Oh, Danny Elfman, the Oingo Boingo guy, like you want him to do the soundtrack?"
That's amazing.
And then Tim Burton said, "Play the theme," and like I'm assuming on a boombox because it was like '89. He hits like on the tape, and it's like his recording of the Batman. And they said, "Oh yeah, he's hired. Like whatever he wants, he's doing the soundtrack." That was I think as much as that movie owes to Danny Elfman, this movie owes so much to John Williams.
Oh my God, it's some of his best work. Absolutely, no question.
Boom, boom, boom. It's so simple,
and who
right?
doesn't know that?
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't know that? Like, I do that when like I have to go pay the bills. Like, I hum it to myself because I'm dreading it. Like it's funny because this is a film we're looking at that I think does have a place in the common consciousness of pop culture. There, I don't think are many Americans that don't know about this movie. I'm not going to be so, naive to think like worldwide it's as well known, but I mean, this is something that is definitely part of our current culture and I think is like a mainstay.
Well, when John Williams played that as the score, like Spielberg turned to him and laughed, and like he realized that John Williams wasn't laughing back, and he's like, no, seriously, John, where's the rest of it? He's like, no, that's it. Trust me. And yeah, and I'd say that song or that score is maybe even more iconic than the movie. Is that fair?
I would say it's like definitely part of, like I said, the pop culture lexicon that we all share. But
yeah.
I mean, the two go hand in hand. I mean, like it's not scary if you don't know a shark is coming,
right?
Yeah. And it makes the shark scenes scarier because you don't see the shark, but you hear this music, and music often tells us how we're supposed to feel without us realizing it. And you feel like the little hairs on the back of your neck go up, and you start to feel a little bit of dread. And when that music kicks in, you're like, what are we waiting for? What? It's kind of like boss music in video games now. You know what I mean?
Well, nerd, by the way. In 1976 at the Oscars, February, March, whenever it was that year, John Williams was actually running the orchestra. And when he won the Oscar for Best Original Score, he had to run on stage, accept his Oscar, and then immediately run back to manage the orchestra again.
That's amazing! Oh my god, I love it.
So yeah, there's an old saying like "Kismet," where everything just kind of comes together. And everything falls into place exactly how it should. Like the shark didn't work right, but that's good because it created more tension because you didn't see the shark all the time and you didn't see how fake it was. Right. It was a young director who was willing to put up with a lot and didn't walk off the set or ruin his actors. Robert Shaw didn't drink too much, everything. And then
it kind of all came together beautifully.
The music score,
right.
The promotion for it. And I think what's hilarious is that we look at movies now, like Summer Now, and everything is dropped that they want to make money. Men in Black, Avengers, Spider-Man, name it.
Right.
But back then, summer was the dumping ground. It was the January for crap.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's I'll just dump these here. Everybody's going to be outside. They're not going to be in seeing movies. They go in the movies in the wintertime because it's cold outside.
Right.
But then when Jaws hit, and then 2 years later, Star Wars hit, summer's where the movies are at now.
Well, yeah, especially too if you cater somewhat to a bit of a younger audience, and by younger I just mean under the age of 18, because in the summertime you're not in school anymore. And you have more free time. What I think is interesting about how Jaws all came together, John and I have a lot of experience with being on stage and whatnot. It kind of reminds me of how you're in Tech Week for a show and you open soon, and Tech Week is just a fucking mess. And the light cues are wrong, and your costume doesn't quite fit right. Nobody remembers their goddamn lines, and it's just a shit show. But then there's some kind of magic on opening night where everything is perfect, or at least it seems like it. I've experienced that many times where you've been on the Monday of Tech Week and you're like, there's no fucking way. But by the time you get to Friday night, it's perfect.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that came together, I think, to make this movie as successful it was. And it wasn't always intentional, like you said, with, and how we mentioned before, with using the shark less to make more of an impact. That's not something that I think a young filmmaker would necessarily realize, but in doing so, created one of the more iconic horror films of all time. I mean, a lot of people consider this to be a horror movie.
It absolutely is a horror movie. I never saw it as a horror movie as a kid, because to me, when I was a little kid, when you're young, you're very simple in the way you look at things. Freddy Krueger was Nightmare on Elm Street was a horror movie. Yeah, because he had a burn up face and claw hands, and he's coming to kill you. Yeah, Chucky was a doll. It had a knife.
Right.
Those are the simple things. Yeah, sharks just a creature who lives in the ocean. To me,
right.
I didn't see it as a horror movie. I just saw it as they have to stop a shark. But this terrified so many people.
Sure.
I think this is I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but number 6 on the all-time greatest horror movies of all time.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I can't remember from which
cool.
list.
That's really cool. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of different lists. But a lot of the success of this movie, too, came from a lot of improvising.
Wow.
Because they had a lot of downtime, and they were allowed a lot of freedom.
That's cool.
The scene where Brody is having that horrible day, and he basically has, his head in his hands, and he looks at his son, the younger one of his sons, and his son's mimicking and mirroring everything he does. That came from them, Roy Scheider with the kid while they were in between takes, and the kid was just naturally doing that. And he ran and grabbed Steven and said, "Steven, you got to see this." And they just brought in a camera, I don't think any lights or any audio, and they just filmed back and forth shots of the kid and Roy Scheider, and the kid mirroring everything he does, and that ended up in the movie. It was just on the moment. It was
Very
in the
cool.
moment.
I did not know that was improvised. That's really cool.
A lot of the dialogue, a lot of the interactions with characters were just completely improvised, by the actors on the set. It was very strategically laid out in storyboards, but they did a lot of freedom, and I think a lot of that freedom was born out of delays, because if you're there on the call list, if it's a shark day, That's all you're filming that day. You can't, let's just grab some of the equipment, and go in and we'll shoot some of the indoor stuff. No, you're waiting there until the shark gets fixed. But you have a few of the sets. You have the boat set. You have this, that. And if it's going to need 3 or 4 hours to fix the shark, and they said on a 12-hour shoot day for them, they really only filmed about 2 hours a day.
Right.
Because the shark would just break all the time.
Oh, my God. I can't imagine how frustrating that would have been.
They would shoot a lot of extra stuff and, and a lot of okay, let's do a shot where you're loading your gun, Brody, and from below, and then... maybe we'll use it in the film, maybe we won't, but we'll have it, and the whole Indianapolis thing, the big speech in the movie, the one thing, one of the main things, I want to say the main thing, but one of the main things that people remember about that movie was completely just made up.
Yeah.
And I mean, they wrote it out. He didn't literally just riff it, but they did it because they had all this time to kill,
Right.
And that's amazing how a lot of this film, for being a big blockbuster movie, there was a lot of indie gritty stuff going on,
indie incubation, kind of like a master class happening at all at once,
and that was I think that's a lot of credit goes to hiring a 27-year-old fairly unknown TV director to do this movie, because if they had gotten just some studio guy who was 55 and done 30 movies for Universal Studios, this movie probably wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. You needed that gumption, that balls, and that refusal to give up.
Right.
Right. So my hat's off to Spielberg on that one. Did he ever make anything else after this movie?
I think he just kind of faded out a little bit. I haven't really heard much.
Well, fun fact. He had the highest grossing movie of the 1970s, 80s, and 90s with Jaws, E.T., and Jurassic Park.
I guess he's doing okay.
Yeah,
for himself.
I think he's doing all right. I think he won a couple of them gold statues.
I think so. Any other final thoughts on Jaws, John?
Well, I think there's two key things to take away from Jaws. I think one, it took kind of the low budget Roger Corman-esque type of movies, and anybody knows Roger Corman's on my Mount Rushmore of directors I admire, because of what he's done. And they put a huge budget behind it. And I don't think they'll ever give any credit to Roger Corman or anybody of his ilk. But what they did is they copied that kind of style and just threw millions and millions of dollars at it. And then they made that type of movie mainstream, they sold out, man. But you look at the way Quentin Tarantino made Grindhouse a thing,
right?
And then Robert Rodriguez came and he did his Grindhouse things, and now the hobo with a shotgun. It's this is so neat. Most of the people have never seen these bottom of the video rental store bin with the smoke, and I'm like hooker with a torpedo. What are these movies? In a fat 1980s Quentin Tarantino. Oh, you read that, all right? Okay. How he made
hooker with a torpedo. God, you're the worst.
Note to self: write hooker with a torpedo script. But how he made those type of movies popular, but with $1 million budget. That's what they did for this, and for better or worse. And before I ask you the same question and your take on it, I want to get your thought on this. Is it a good thing or bad thing what Jaws did to the movie industry by the summer blockbuster?
Boy, that's such a complicated question, because I think in the initial bit when the movies were a bit more Indian flavor, I feel like it was a good thing to get people excited about movies again.
You said indie in flavor. It sounded like you said Indian flavor.
Oh, indie in flavor.
Delicious curry.
Sorry about it. I saw your confused face and I was like, what? What'd I do?
Here, no, Elaine, a little more apricot brandy for you.
Oh, perfect. Oh, I'm going to throw up. Okay.
Please don't throw up on the mic.
Oh. Oh, God, it's so foul. But,
no, you're no Quint.
Usually I can take a good shot, okay? I can take shots pretty well.
By the way, Quint is roughly Latin for fifth, and he's the fifth person to be murdered in that movie.
How about it?
His ship is the Orca, which is the only true predator of the white shark.
You are just a fountain of knowledge, my friend.
I love this movie.
But anyway, I think that as far as what it did for the summer blockbuster, whether that's good or bad, I think that over time, the summer blockbuster, I feel like it's been perverted. Because like I said earlier, with the films being released now in April, get the hell out of here. Get out of here with that shit, and the movies just keep trying to top themselves, and I feel like we're seeing quite the era right now of the comic book film, and I'm real tired of that. I would love to see something else, and I don't even mind if it's a blockbuster film as long as it's a good script and it's not about a fucking superhero. I'm kind of over it. Like, I liked Endgame, don't get me wrong.
Will you go to see Spider-Man with me?
Yeah,
Please?
I'll see Spider-Man with you,
Yay.
of course. But, I don't want to see superheroes anymore. If we could get back to a little bit more of a young director being like, well, fuck, let's see if this works. I could get behind that, because I don't mind an action adventure kind of piece, but the writing needs to be there, and it needs to be exciting, and make the movies fun, because a lot of times, we watched 22 Marvel movies. Some of them were like a lot of work. Like, they shouldn't be this hard. They should not be this tiring.
I'm looking at you, Iron Man 2.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man.
Did Steven Spielberg and George Lucas ruin the 70s indie art film movement?
That's an entirely other episode.
All right.
We're not talking about that today. We talked about Jaws. That's it.
But I just think there were so many amazing films like Chinatown and The Godfather. And
So
Godfather
I said we're not doing that, and you're just doing it. We're talking about
I
Jaws.
thought there was a shift when Jaws came out. It's not all rainbows and kittens.
Right. Well, that's like for another episode for another day, I think. I think it's fair to say.
Lane, what are your some of your takes on Jaws, your lasting thoughts?
Well, I mean, we watch it every year for a reason. I love it. It feels like summer. The fact that we watch it on the 4th of July every year feels like festive somehow, because it's the 4th of July in the movie. I'm a big proponent of practical effects, and like, this is like the Mac Daddy of them all. This is like the practical effect. I mean, it didn't work, but like, this is something that people worked with and tried to get to a new place with effects and filmmaking and what was possible. So, I'm a big fan for those reasons. And I know John shit all over the book, listeners, but it was actually, it was a fine read. Again, I read it in the summer in a hammock. I mean, that really helps, or, if you want to read it beachside, maybe not beachside.
Hemingway for head trauma. Basically, it's Ernest Hemingway for second graders.
Wow, okay. I mean, continuing to shit, but I don't think it's a bad book. I think it's cool if you have knowledge of the movie first, because you can kind of appreciate the differences. I think it's worth checking out. But the movie is, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I just think it's really well done.
Agreed. So yeah, I would definitely recommend you check it out.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it.
Please tell me there's somebody listening to this that hasn't seen the movie.
Oh my God, we just ruined all of it.
Spoiler alert, they killed a shark.
Spoiler alert, the shark dies.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well,
and the movie ends on my birthday.
Oh, that's true. The last day. We've done the math, and we think it's July 7th, which is your birthday.
Yeah.
All right, so I think that's it for us on Jaws, guys. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at Psycho Show. You can also find us on the Epicast Network at epicastnetwork.com. If you have a favorite movie or a question for us, just contact us at our website, cinematograveshow.com. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, and we have awesome news. We are also now on Pandora.
What?
There aren't a ton of podcasts on Pandora right now, but we're one of the few. We're really excited about it, and we will see you next time.
Smile, you son of a bitch.
Epicast.